committee meeting held 8th of July 2021 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. I have a mover. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Rutherford, I can see your hand there. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any topics on the agenda today that members need to declare an interest? I see Councillor Harpiter.
I'm sorry, in the minutes, I wasn't present. I was present via Zoom, so I just wanted to just check that, I did see that. So I was just checking that. Sorry that, Mayor Helen, just making sure that it was right in the minutes. So sorry about that. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry about that.
Thank you. So are you saying the minutes are correct?
Yes, they are. I just read it clearly. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No? Right, we can move straight to, there are no late items today, no presentations, so that means we can go straight to the officer's report, item 7. The first one is 7.1, CEDA's annual report. We're on page 10. And I'm going to hand over to David Murphy and Michael Hawker, please, to introduce this and then hand over to CEDA.
Good afternoon, everybody. The CEDA annual report, as it regularly comes around, just some things to note before we hear from CEDA is, just like last year, due to the impact of COVID on Audit New Zealand, the audit for this report is going to be held much later in the year. So like last year, you have the ability with your resolution today to accept the report subject to that audit being finally completed. So I'll hand it over to David and Malcolm and his team.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Mayor Helen. We have David Wright, Interim CE, on this link. Also have Jackie, Janet and Georgia that I know of that have zoomed in as well, and I believe directors Bobby O'Fee and Margie Murray were going to join as well. So I won't say too much. Clearly it's in the report and you've all had the chance to read that, but it is pleasing that despite the COVID challenges, this region has continued to do well and really outperform a lot of the rest of the country. In terms of a key number of call-outs, clearly our part in the Central New Zealand distribution hub strategy has been important, but of course we are but one of a number of players in that, but that has moved on well. The Manawatu Agri-Tech strategy, we're pleased with that development and looking forward that will integrate, of course, with the food strategy, which we're getting underway. Inward investment, it's still a challenge. We have obviously a lot of government sector spending here, which we're very pleased about, but we do need to do more in this space. But pleasingly, we've had the likes of Australian Defence Apparel come through, and there are many other possibilities in the pipeline as well, but it can be a slow burn. Te Apiti, Manawatu Gorge, PGF funding, that's something that we're pleased with, but really turning that into something that's still in front of us. STAP money, that's the Strategic Tourism Asset Protection Program. We did secure quite a lot of money, 700,000 from that, and there's more money as well. And we've used that obviously to help with the destination management plan, and also helping businesses with increased digital capability as a consequence of dealing with COVID. And our original business partner program, we've helped 779 businesses, of which 86 were Māori. Pleasingly, we've continued with Te Aho Tamaka and getting more people involved there to help promote our region, and also around talent and skills. We've had the Central Region Advisory Group formed. I could go on and say a lot more, but probably enough from me. I'll just invite David Wright to make comments from his point of view, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, apologies for lateness as well.
Right, thank you, Malcolm. Just to add to that, can I just acknowledge the staff in their efforts in what has been a very challenging year for one reason or another, and continues to be with the likes of current COVID restrictions. So just to acknowledge the staff, and I'm pleased actually with what we are reporting that the organisation has achieved. So a big thank you to the staff and their contribution.
Thank you. So we have the report in front of us, and we'll take that as read. Let's open it up for any questions or comments from the team. Either raise your hand or use the chat. And we have one there from Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mayor Voice. I have got a couple of questions around the sorted expo. I'm looking at page 26. So I'm just wondering if there is, what the reason is, I guess, for the drop in numbers, looking at May 2019 sorted numbers were around 4,500, and then now we're reporting 250. What's the reason for the drop?
Well, I'll kick off on that. I mean, there may be some more nuances to this, but in a word, COVID, we had to completely reconfigure the way we went about things because of COVID, and we ran some virtual sessions, but it wasn't across the board. So it was really a response to those circumstances.
So I understood it was an in-person expo. Was the entire thing online?
Well, I'll hand over, who wants to pick this up from the CEDA team, because there were different things handled, but.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Oh, sorry, Janet, you're here, that's cool, you can do it.
So yeah, we did, there were two parts to sort it. So obviously in 2020, we couldn't hold an in-person expo. So we went virtual and ran that right into the next financial year with a series of online tailored and targeted seminars. And then in 2021, we had re-engaged with the schools, the exhibitors, the attendees to try and, I guess, make sure that what we were doing was fit for purpose, particularly in a risky COVID environment in terms of not being able to plan for huge, expos that we're going to have thousands of people in. So what we did was we aligned it with New Zealand Agri-Food Week, had a food and fibre focused edition, which was much smaller, much more targeted to encourage one-on-one connections within the food and fibre sector, which was one of our key sectors that is having some talent pipeline issues. So there was just over 200 attendees with a mix of secondary, tertiary students, career changers, job seekers. So it was a bit smaller. And then what we also did was partnered with UCO on their broader career talks later in August. So we have trialled a couple of different things to, I guess, regroup and make sure that sorta is fit for purpose going forward.
So is 200 attendees considered successful?
Look, it was a trial in terms of the specific one. So, I mean, success is sort of measured on a few different things in terms of some of the engagement and longer term. So, yeah, I mean, not a roaring success, but certainly we were happy with what we managed to achieve.
And
could I just add, Alicia, that what we did in response to COVID was picked up at the Economic Development New Zealand conference, and actually we were commended for the way Sorted was pivoted in the circumstances. So
yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I was there. So in terms of the goals and what is trying to be achieved with Sorted pre-COVID versus post-COVID, are the I guess, is the end game still the same? Are you trying to achieve the same thing, or is it actually a different event completely?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alicia, and that's something we're still really working through. You know, we trialled the sector-specific version with the food and fibre edition. We've trialled the online one. We're still operating in a COVID environment, but now we're speaking with partners, including UCO, on what the best framework and delivery model looks like going forward.
Okay, and when you said that you talked to some people before you kind of went ahead with this year's one, do those people include secondary school careers advisors?
Yeah, so there were surveys as well as, I guess, qualitative conversations, and that was exhibitors, schools, through the career providers and teachers, as well as some of the training providers as well. So yeah, we did a bit of a, I guess, qualitative and quantitative review on it.
Okay, and I guess just in terms of the narrowing of the focus to it being a food and fibre careers expo, was there any consideration around what would, I guess, be offered to young people in the gap that was created by it being a more targeted expo rather than a general careers expo? Has there been anything to kind of fill that gap, or what's happened with young people who are not looking for career pathways that within food and fibre?
That's why we partnered with UCO on their Career Talks Expo, which was a great success in August. So not within the same financial year as us, but it was a good follow-on. So again, I'd probably need to refer back to our talent and skills manager on where things are at the moment, but we can definitely report back.
Yeah, okay. Then just one final question would be, with whatever the sort it looks like in future, is it possible to have those kind of reported hand in hand, because it looks like it's a very small piece of the picture by just, you know, like the sentence touching on sort it, where it's actually obviously a bit bigger than just that kind of one piece in the report.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Thank you. And probably also a similar point in terms of our wider sector support work and how we're working and focusing in with specific sectors in the talent space, but as part of our broader sector development work. So that's something we definitely need to factor in. Thanks.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you. Councillor Harpenden.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks to all at CEDA for all the work that you have done. Just a question around the visitor management plan or the destination management plan. I went to a presentation mid-year and wanted to know on this plan, wanted to know what the update was since then. I know that we've had a lockdown since then, but I wanted to know if there was any update on this plan over the last few months.
Hand over to you, Janet.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, good question. With the destination management plan, which we developed at the end of sort of 2019 after quite an extensive engagement, and we're ready to sort of launch and go public and build our steering group in early 2020, which was hit on the head with COVID. So what we've actually done now is we're working with MB to support a refresh of the strategy and a complete re-engagement. We've still got some big deliverables from the existing destination management plan, which are well underway. The most recent one is the finalisation of the Rangatane or Manawatu Māori tourism strategy, which we're really pleased, so we can now move into implementation with them. But yeah, what we'll be doing is actually re-engaging on the plan to make sure it's actually big enough and driven by and for the region, not just a CEDA strategy that sort of sits in the background.
So that's the destination management plan, the visitor management plan that sits underneath that?
The destination management plan encompasses the visitor economy, but it's about ensuring our visitor economy is growing sustainably to the value and benefit of our communities. So it's all in one. It's an integrated plan that takes in, you know, communities, environment, infrastructure and planning, all of those key components. So to make sure we do that really well, we believe a re-engagement and refresh of that is really critical.
Because the key question that came out of that discussion was that we didn't have enough bed nights or beds in the city, in the region.
Yeah, and that's still an issue, obviously, with the conference and event sector continually being impacted. We need to really make sure that the destination management plan has a bit of a COVID lens on it as well, but also takes into account that wider footprint that our region and particularly our city has with some of the critical events, you know, secondary school sports, teams champs. We really prop up Horowhenua and Tararua's economy when those events are happening, which is great, but how do we make sure we're, you know, equipped to take more absorption there?
In the OGNZ conference for next year.
Yes, yeah. Well, I don't know if we can build a hotel that quickly, but we're certainly certainly a focus.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Malcolm, I see you've got your hand up. Or was that from previously?
Sorry, no, I haven't. So don't know how that happened.
Okay.
Great.
Right. Who else have we got here? Councillor Brent. Barrett.
Thank you, Mayor Warboys, and thanks to the officers and CETA team for the report. Just a couple questions. The first one is around the surprisingly long journey to transition from reporting on average wages in the region to reporting on median wages. As I understand it, we had indicated that median wages was what we were after in the reporting, and I saw page 15, it looks like we got there, but page 48, it looks like we didn't quite. So on page 15, we do see median wages reported, but that's not yet reflected through in the metrics table on page 48. I just wanted to understand what CETA's understanding was of what indicator they're monitoring there and what the intent is.
Hey, Brent, thanks for your question. It's my area of work, and that's a mistake. It's obviously been with you. We use the previous year's monitoring indicators and that sort of stuff as a way to be able to reflect on how much we've moved in the current year. And I think we updated that in the half-yearly report this year, but I've just managed to miss that out or not update it correctly in the annual one. So I'll make sure we get that fixed up.
Cool, thank you. The other question that I had might be more around for council officers, given that the monitoring indicators come from council reports ultimately. And just looking ahead, just wondered if there's any comment around how possible it would be to provide monitoring indicators around the emissions intensity of the economy. So that's total economy size and total emissions.
Yeah, hi Brent, it's David here. I don't have an immediate answer on that now, but that's something I'm happy to go back and have a chat with our experts, being Adam, and then connect with CETA and Michael and look at how we can address that if we can.
Great, thank you. And could I just understand, because obviously that would need to come in through the forming of the next statement of intent and sort of plan for CETA, sort of the timing of that in terms of being able to get an understanding of what we could put in there as an indicator relative to the timing of setting that next expectation set?
Yeah, so we're proposing to report up the next statement of expectations and to the December Joint Strategic Planning Committee. So I can look into that between now and then connect with the Joint Strategic Planning Committee as to whether or not there's a recommendation that the KPIs are adjusted through that process.
Great, thank you. That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone further with a question or comment in relation to the report? No? Okay, I just had a couple of general ones, given that we're all here together. I just thought the timing would be quite good. There still seems to be some ongoing confusion around CETA's role in the district and its role specifically with our business community. Can you just clarify for us the role that you see you have in the economic development role with businesses in the Manawatu district?
That's a big question, but I'll kick off and I'll invite others to join in. I mean, clearly things are happening at different levels, and by that I mean clearly there are businesses in the district who are supported by our regional business partner program. When we then elevate to the sort of bigger strategic picture, something like the country road concept that's in there, Janet might want to elaborate a bit on that. And then of course we look at something like the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub strategy. We think that's relevant to Fielding or Manawatu district businesses, just like it is to Palmerston North. Our whole destination management plan, you know, that's overarching. When we talk about agri-tech strategy and of course our food strategy, they're all relevant to the district as well as the city. Of course, there are different points of emphasis with some of this, but in terms of inward investment, for example, industrial land in Fielding is just as relevant as industrial land in Palmerston North. I could go on.
No, that's fine. If there's anyone else there from CEDA who'd want to make that comment, I just think it's really good to be really clear so that when we're getting inquiries from the community about, well, what does CEDA do? And many people think there's a grassroots element to the work that CEDA does with our businesses. So it's trying to understand where everybody fits in.
Yeah, but please, David or anyone else, add some more colour if you would like.
Absolutely. I'll just add a comment, Mayor Helen, and then Janet or Jackie can make any additional comments if they wish. I think we are right at a pivot point at the moment. We have got the distribution hub strategy, which has a accelerating investment component to it. We are about to launch in terms of the next one, which is around the food and beverage sector by March. We'll have some steerings there as to what needs to be done to support growth in business. We have the Martin Jenkins work, which is due very next week around their recommendations to us around how we support business attraction, retention, expansion. So there's a number of things there that are saying to me that the organisation is going to have to look at whether it is best positioned and staffed to actually achieve the aspirations that are within those strategies. So if I'm looking at what's one of the big issues for us going into this current year, it is actually realising the aspirations coming through those three pieces of work.
Thank you for that. And also just while we've got you here a bit more current, can you just give us an update on where you're at with staff recruitment? And then maybe a general comment about the impact of COVID now that we're in another lockdown level, and we had last year's as well, about what you're seeing in the business community and the support that CEDA's doing around that.
Yep, again, I'll make some initial comments, but equally invite either Jackie or Janet to add to it if they wish. In terms of staffing, we are fully staffed bar one position at the moment, in either by way of permanent or contracted individuals. The one vacant position is that of the chief executive, which is still going through its recruitment. In terms of that second question around how has the local businesses responded to the current COVID restrictions, then we've been pleasantly surprised in terms of reaching out to them that it's probably best, the sentiment is calm and cautiously optimistic. So there hasn't been the same concerns coming back to the team, as I understand happened a year back or 20 months back. So that's one comment. And they seemingly are better prepared this time round. They know where to go to get the relevant information, especially around government financial support. So potentially the one exception to that is the hospitality business. But from what we can see from the work we've done, in relatively good shape given the circumstances they've been working through.
Thank you. Mayor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we in questions or comments? Because I've got a comment.
Oh, both. Please carry on.
Okay, all right. Look, I just want to make a comment on behalf of the city, and it's been a challenging year for everybody, and CEDA as well. I just want to thank CEDA for the work that they've done, and the city and the region, I think, are going through, despite COVID, a pretty buoyant time, and that's because of the diverse nature of our economy, but also underpinned by a really strong agribusiness sector as well. To Malcolm and the board, thank you for your efforts in the past year, but also caretaker David. We've run into each other a few times, but also Janet and the staff. I know it's been quite difficult, but just want to acknowledge the work that you've done as well. I think it's important to do that. There's a number of things that are on the go at the moment, and they do set us apart from other parts of New Zealand. That's that central New Zealand distribution hub and that strategy work, but probably the hard mahi starts now in terms of how do we implement that? How do we do the how? How do we get things really happening? Also, the food strategy, which I'm really excited about, and that really is from farm to fork or paddock to plate, however you want to term it. But it's something that our region does very, very well, along with a whole lot of other regions, of course, within New Zealand. But we have a couple of extra strings to the bow there around food science and innovation, and again, distribution and transportation. And finally, the agri-tech, the agribusiness side, which flows over into our city as well. So I think it's well done, everybody. It has been a hard year. We don't really know what lies ahead, but we're well placed to combat it. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you, Mayor Grant, and just double down on your comments around these strategies. It's one thing to develop an elegant strategy. The next real challenge, though, is to implement them and get runs on the board as a consequence. So totally support those comments.
Thank you. And from Manawatu District, we'd certainly endorse those comments from Mayor Grant with the role that CEDA has played. But yeah, and totally agree, there's some really exciting things on the horizon. Like you say, getting the strategy, now we're into the action and really making that happen. I see a hand up there from Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I've been booted off Zoom about 7 times so far and reconnected, so I've missed a little bit. And apologies if I have, but and a bit late putting the hand up. But more of a comment, really. I was interested on page 57 around the coverage on TV1 on breakfast, where a reported reach of over 1 million people viewing the Manawatu segment. I actually don't watch breakfast, but I was a bit intrigued to know if anybody, given the number of programs we've actually, as a region, been fortunate to have on country calendar in the last 12 months. And I think, if I'm right, probably about 4 at least, I think, in the Manawatu district. And I actually, I'd really like to know, one, do we have any, through CEDA or anybody, have any contact with country calendar to and further encourage them to highlight some of the magnificent stuff that's going on in the agri sector and the agri-tech sector and the food sector. I know we've had one country calendar on our own, Councillor G. Taylor, and I think there's been the singing poet down south of it, and I'm absolutely sure that we've had significant coverage for the Manawatu area in that. And I just, more of a comment really, think is that country calendar may provide the district with further opportunities.
Yeah, I just say I'm not aware of the contact, but Janet may be able to put more colour into that. But yeah, some of you would have seen the Corbetts and their potatoes on the last country calendar episode on Sunday. So.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hadfield. We obviously we didn't show any in our annual report because we weren't directly involved with influencing those. It's generally through the grapevine and the brilliant work of Fed Farmers and so on. But it doesn't mean that we don't pitch to a variety of media organisations, and they're certainly on our radar in terms of telling our food story going forward. Yeah, I agree. They've done some brilliant work.
Thank you. That's a very good point, and I just add, tongue in cheek, Manawatu District also has a connection with Guy Williams, but I'm not sure that we actually want to encourage too much more of that style of promotion. However, any publicity is good. Right, are there any further questions or comments in relation to this report? If not, I'll ask Jackie, are you the appropriate person, Councillor Ford? No?
Move the recommendation.
Oh, okay. So I was just going to give Jackie an opportunity to go through the financials with us and check that whether there's any questions or comments on those.
Yeah, sure. So you'll see from the financial statements that there was a deficit of $183,000 for the financial year versus a budget of a deficit of 182. So that's landed pretty squarely on the mark. Most of the variances this year were due to the additional funding that we received either via the Regional Business Partner Program for additional business support through COVID-19 or due to the STAP funding, the Strategic Tourism Asset Protection Program funding, and that was to support those businesses in our visitor sector through the impacts of COVID as well. So our current equity at the end of 30th of June is sitting around that $557,000 mark, which is generally we would like to see it sitting about that 500k mark, just for risk perspective. Other variances were that we had some savings in employee expenses due to some vacancies throughout the year. And we've obviously had the increase in other operating expenses, which was partly due to our shift and partly due to some additional staff costs in relation to recruitment. As you're aware, we did have another restructure during the year due to the reduction in funding from councils for the 21-22 financial year. But fortunately, due to a couple of staff members, not fortunately really, but a couple of staff members resigned during that process, and so therefore, after the announcement of the reduction in funding, and so therefore no sort of further redundancies were required. Just further to what David has already said, is that we do have had some vacancies, mostly the CEO role, and the others are currently either covered by contractors or fixed term employees, and that's pending the Regional Business Partner Program contract, which is due to expire at the end of March next year. And that's me. Any questions?
Great, thank you. Any questions of Jackie and the financials? Councillor Harper, I saw you had your hand raised. No?
No, I was just going to second the motion that Councillor Ford put up.
Okay, thank you. So no further questions or comments? Okay, so we will go to the recommendation that's on page 10. That has been moved by Councillor Ford and seconded by Councillor Harper. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. So I just also want to take this opportunity to endorse the comments that Mayor Grant said. It has been a challenging year. There are some significant projects on the table. There's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes, and the challenge for us now is to action these, get them into play, and the benefits to our wider region are enormous. So I just also thank David and your team for the work that you've done throughout the year, and sometimes some quite trying conditions, so thank you. Right, so we'll move to item 7.2, we're on page 87. This is the annual CEDA monitoring and our quarterly economic report. And I'm going to hand over, we've got Stacey online, and is Peter with us today as well? No, just Stacey, it sounds like it's you.
Yes, sorry, just on that, Peter Crawford's unfortunately unavailable due to personal circumstances, but we've connected with Stacey, who's going to lead the report. So,
thank you. Thanks, Stacey.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mayor Grant and councillors. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. I hope there are no issues. It won't be a moment. Right, can everybody see that?
No, we've got nothing different at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'll try that again. 2, share.
Aha, there we go.
Okay, great. Okay, so yes, I've picked this up in the last day or so, so I do apologise if I've left anything out. I think I've got most of the data that we usually have. Okay, so the first thing I'll start with is we've actually had earlier in the week when I was doing the quarterly reporting for the Manawatu district, I noticed that the outputs from Infometrics in terms of the GDP result were not rational due to the fact that all our indicators were very strong, yet the GDP result for the district was very weak compared to what we would expect. So I went back to Infometrics and questioned them about that. And with Peter's help, it was discovered that they'd actually use the expenditure data for Ruapehu, where there's been quite a decline in spending over the last 12 months, being very much a tourist centre. So once that was recalculated through the model, that's made quite a change to our GDP result and improved it substantially, which is exactly what I'd expect looking at the strong indicators across both the Palmerston North City and Manawatu district. So the result of that has been an increase in the district GDP from 3.2% to 5.8%. Annual GDP growth for the Manawatu region rises from 4.5% to 5.4%. So a strong increase there. So I do understand there will have to be some type of amendment made to the reports, and also the quarterly attachment that you have has also been updated by Infometrics. So I'll work with Ali and the governance team to make sure all the correct documents are provided. Is there any questions around that?
Any questions, just please speak up because I can't see you all.
That's fine, I'll carry on. So, okay, the key findings, well, GDP growth, as we've seen, compares very well with national growth. So we're sitting at that 5.4% relative to 4.2% for New Zealand. Our jobs growth is exceeding national growth, and job seeker numbers are falling faster. So yeah, strong jobs growth and a reduction in job seeker beneficiaries is very positive for our region. We've also had a very strong recovery and growth in consumer and tourism spending as well. New dwelling consents remained elevated across the region. Of course, building consent values are also reflecting this strong investment flowing into the region. I haven't got that on this list, but of course we also know that we have very strong house price inflation, which is causing some concern as well. We'll talk about that within the report as well. So the $8 billion in major development and construction projects to 2035 is highly supportive of the outlook for the regional economy. It's interesting, every time I get an update from Peter on the list of inward investment flowing into the region, it's gone up by about another $1 billion lately. So there is a lot happening in the region. Commodity prices are incredibly strong at the moment, and favourable export conditions will continue as they have over the COVID period. They've been substantial support to the regional economy. They're expected to continue to do so. There are some issues around supply side constraints, as we know, and those of inflationary pressures are flowing through as well. So headline statistics, filled jobs have increased by 2.7% from 12 months ago, the year ended June 2020. That's a 2.3% increase in the Manawatu district and 2.9% increase in Palmy. So earning salaries and wages, I'm not sure if Peter has the magic wand, he may do, but I could not get this from Statistics New Zealand, and I questioned them through the chat as well. The data at this point seems to be only up to March 2021, but we do expect with the strong jobs growth that we will again have a strong annual increase in earnings and salaries, and that will again substantially exceed the New Zealand increase, but we'll update that information as soon as it is available to us. So this is our growth track now in terms of our GDP. So annual gross domestic product over the year, again, 5.4%, very strong there with an almost vertical line there in terms of our economic growth over the last 12 months versus New Zealand at 4.2%, which is also very positive considering the challenges that we've faced over the last 15 months. So job seeker beneficiaries are declining, just going to move this. So they fell from 4,279 in June 2020 to 4,014. So that's a reduction of 6.2% over the year. And that compares with just a negative 0.1% decline for New Zealand. So again, our labour indicators are looking very strong in that sense, although clearly we do have some supply side constraints there as well. So retail spending in the region has outperformed to July 2021. So in terms of overall spending, we do see that we've had a little bit, as we would expect, a bit of a decline in retail expenditure as we entered back into lockdown in August. We can see that they're quite starkly to August 22. So New Zealand has declined by a lesser amount than the Manawatu district and Palmerston North. So Palmerston North retailing is constrained to a similar level as the national retail expenditure under COVID levels 3 and 4, but under levels 1 and 2 is growing stronger than the national trend. So that's positive now that we're back into level 2 restrictions. Manawatu district is a little bit different in the sense it's not as affected by level 3 and 4 because we're predominantly still buying groceries and fuel, which accounts for a larger proportion of our spending overall. So we tend to be slightly less affected by the lockdown. Okay, there were 1,405 consents for new dwellings consented across the Manawatu-Wanganui region to the year ended June 2021. Very positive and much needed too. There was 722 consents for new dwellings across the Manawatu region. Again, very strong and very much needed. So that includes 205 for Manawatu district and 523 in Palmerston North. So this is coming off the highs of a year ago when we had very strong consents, but there was 758 consents for new dwellings issued in the Manawatu region 12 months ago. So the annual value of Manawatu region building consents is also strong. So there was a total of $514.4 million worth of construction projects consented to the year end of June. Over the 2020 calendar year, the value of consents increased by almost 144 million to close to 500 million. So to put this in context in terms of the strength of our construction investment coming through, the average annual consent values were 495.5 million over the last year compared with 260 on average over the 10 years to June 2021. So that just shows the relative strength of the performance now to earlier in the decade. So this is flowing through to in terms of our per capita construction spend. So the total value of projects included in the estimate for the Manawatu region is 3.1 billion. Now this is Peter's data, so I wasn't involved with these estimates, but we can see from the strength of our construction investment that we are third in terms of the regions in terms of per capita investment, which is very strong and very favourable to our economic activity. House prices, of course, continue to surge across the region. Average house prices in August, there's no change. Basically, in New Zealand, they rose by 26.6%. Manawatu district was 32.5% up to $645,000 average price, and PNCC reached $742.80 and $336, a 37.3% increase. So there's no let up in that house price growth, and I'm sure all of you have seen the recent media reports around the strength of the market right across the Manawatu-Wanganui region. So our social housing register, as the price of property goes up, of course, a greater proportion of our population is forced into either subsidised or social housing or public housing. This is evident across the entire country. It's not just here in the Manawatu-Wanganui region, but we're certainly seeing it here. So there were 843 households on the register by the end of June, counting both Palmerston North and the Manawatu district. This includes 729 Palmerston North families and 114 district households. So the number of families on the waiting list for public housing has increased by 85.3% over the 2 years to June 2021. So it's a massive increase. And has increased actually by a factor of 4.8 since 2016. So we're all aware that housing is a substantial issue across the country and one that requires substantial investment, especially in the public housing and affordable housing space. So our trade conditions remain strong for our local exporters, which has been very positive throughout the entire global pandemic period, where global demand from overseas has really supported economic activity here in the region. So despite the high New Zealand dollar currently, export values are remaining resilient. The value of New Zealand exports overall increased by 0.3% over the year to June and 9.2% in the June quarter versus the June quarter 2020. So very strong growth. Exports to China increased by 12.3%. So still a very strong market for us there. And yeah, some of our other markets that grew very strongly were our internet demand from Indonesia and France for our food products, which is very positive. So one other thing that is supporting the New Zealand economy is our terms of trade. So we've got very high terms of trade at the moment. So the price of our exports relative to the goods that we import have appreciated more. So we can buy a lot more with the money that we earn from our exports than what we could previously, which is a very positive position for the New Zealand economy to be in, and really is driven by our strength in both in our agri-food, but also some of our manufacturing base as well.
Stacey, can we just take a question there from Councillor Finlay?
Sure.
Thank you. The social housing waiting list, do we record the people that come into town to go on that waiting list, or do we just keep it as numbers? Like we treat everybody as local, or if people coming into town, do we highlight that?
Yes, it does include everyone that comes into the area that is in need of or that is eligible for public housing. So yes, it will include people that have relocated to the area.
But we don't record those that have relocated.
No, it's not available within the data. It's not a variable that they provide to us. They are quite wary of confidentiality, etc., with these data sets.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Stacey.
Okay, so we've also seen solid growth in tourism expenditure in the region. I do apologise, I didn't have time to update this, but this is till to June 2021. So as you see, we've had a really strong increases in terms of our domestic expenditure, and as you would expect, our international expenditure has declined across New Zealand, but not as much as most places. As you'll see from our data there in terms of international, Ruapehu has had the highest decline across the Manawatu-Whanganui region, but both the Manawatu district and Palmerston North are actually doing quite well. So yeah, so there's been a 30% increase in the Manawatu district and a 19.5% for Palmy. But in terms of the region, domestic spending increased by 24% over the year, and a 27% decline in international spending. So that's very positive relative to the effects on some other parts of the country. So again, major development and construction projects exceed that 8 billion, which is very positive, especially including the pipeline of work for our businesses to give them the confidence to expand, very important, but also very difficult under these conditions of supply side constraints. But at least they have the certainty there, which is a good start. So since the last time I caught up with Peter, the additional figures included in this, of course, are the Kiwifrail Freight Hub initial construction cost of over 1 million. Otaki to North of Levin Road has increased a substantial amount as well, around the 300,000 plus. Palmerston North capital investment increased from 687, as you will know, to 1.3, and also the Manawatu district capital spend did increase substantially as well within the LTP. So that's also adding substantial support to economic activity in the area, in the region. Okay, so the supply side constraints and rising inflation expectations. So this is what we're seeing flowing through, have done for a while. So this is being exacerbated by lockdown, but these concerns did exist prior to lockdown. So this is just something to keep an eye on. We know that our freight rate indexes have gone up sort of fivefold, sixfold since last year. So that's increasing the value or the costs of importing goods into the country. And inflation and pricing intentions that were indicated within the most recent business confidence show that with the increased expectations of inflation are at their highest in 10 years at 3.05%. And with that, pricing intentions are also very high for businesses. So the expectation is that those increasing costs will flow through to prices for consumers. It's reasonably inevitable and is starting to happen now. We expect that to heighten over the next 12 months until those supply side pressures soften somewhat. So in terms of CEDA's KPIs, I looked at Peter's reports, and these were the only ones where we actually had the data available to comment on them. So as you can see, from the ones that we have available to us at the moment, CEDA's KPIs are definitely on track. The 5.4% increase in annual GDP versus the 1.8% target. Admittedly, this is off a low base from last year with the COVID-19, but it still is representative of a very strong economic performance over the last 12 months. Electronic cards been up 24.5% over the last year and versus 5.7% target, and change in MSD benefit numbers. Again, unusual times, but still the data is showing that the economy overall at the aggregate level is doing incredibly well. Okay, so in summary, of course, our private sector is going to continue to provide substantial support, or is expected to the regional economy, and with investment for development and construction projects will also provide unprecedented support, I would say, actually. The distribution hub, etc., and all the other work that's going on around the region, Defence Force and central government investment and mid-central health will drive significant economic activity over that period. Jobs growth that we're seeing is reflective of the strong economic performance. It's stronger than most other parts of the country. The regional economy has proven very resilient due to our diverse industry base, as Mayor Grant Smith commented on, which I agree with wholeheartedly. But there will be parts of the economy that will suffer more than others. We do expect that to bounce back reasonably quickly, though. Again, a lot of uncertainty about level 2 and whether we will remain in level 2, for how long we will remain in level 2. But economic activity is picking up. From the data, we can see indications of economic activity picking up quite strongly now. So the thing to keep an eye on over the coming period is those labour supply side constraints and inflation, which are causing concern to businesses and was their number one concern that was highlighted in the August business confidence survey.
Stacey, can we take a question from Mayor Grant, please?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. Look, really, really strong indicators. Anybody would be happy with these, let alone COVID times. Just a couple of things, and maybe you can answer these. The housing consents unusually they're a bit soft at the moment. Everything else seems to be up, which would point to housing should be going strong, and the feeling out there in the market that it is strong. Is that a timing issue or lag?
You're referring to the slight softening in consents for Palmerston North?
Yeah.
I think in terms of a percentage decline, there is a percentage decline, but we're coming off a very strong 2020 year. So quite often when we have that, there is a percentage decline. But from my data, there was 700 across the region and over 500, which is still historically very, very strong for Palmerston North. So it probably is a timing in terms of the way that it's represented by the percentage change. It probably is a timing issue in the sense that it was coming off that very strong 2020 result. Does that answer your question? Yeah,
look, it helps. And I suppose there is a supply and demand of sections as well. And we know we've got perhaps some timing and challenges there as well. But also on commercial vehicle registrations, that's always been quite strong in this region because of the fleets that are operated here. Again, that's unusually low. Do you think that's a timing thing? Because some departments and some businesses buy or change their fleets at different times.
Yeah, I do think that's a timing issue. I wouldn't read a lot into that at all. That's quite volatile, can be quite volatile, that data set. And actually, this is anecdotal, but I know in the evidence suggested in the farming communities, there was actually quite a strong increase in expenditure on commercial vehicles. It may well have been to do with the policy settings that came in around utes, etc. So that showed quite a really strong increase in commercial vehicle registrations in places like the Manawatu district, for example. But yes, I wouldn't read too much into that at this point. I would expect it to smooth out and actually return to a normal trend. But we will keep an eye on that and come back and provide more trend data around that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey. So was there anything further you wanted to add, or was that the end of your report?
Yes, that is the end of my presentations, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Excellent, thank you. And as always, excellent reporting. Thanks to both you and Peter. Let's open it up. Questions or comments? Any others? Please just speak if there are, because I can't see you.
This is Zulfikar. Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Stacey. If you could go back to the slide which shows the international and domestic visitors or tourism figures.
Sorry, I'm just looking for it. Can you see that? Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, I'll make it bigger. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, it might be my misunderstanding. This figure, the very first line, Manawatu district, domestic, international, and total. Is this total change in an accumulative change or change in any of these two columns?
That is a change in the aggregate spend overall between both domestic and international spending.
So can I assume that before that it was 31% or 30% international and less than 2% domestic? Is that the?
Oh, yeah, okay. So in terms of the aggregate numbers, we have in the Manawatu district, we have a very small proportion of international spending. Mm-hmm. So that large decline is from a small amount. So I think it was about 12 million from memory. So basically the majority of our spending is from domestic. So that figure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, actually. I might have to look at that.
Okay, that's all right. I was thinking that it might be my misunderstanding. So
yeah, the total changes for each area overall. So the total reduction or increase in spend overall. So Ruapehu there has had a very small increase, much smaller than anywhere else because of their dependency on international tourism, or greater dependency on international tourism. But I will have another look at those numbers and just make sure that I've maybe present them in a different way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Mayor Grant.
Madam Chair, just really just a comment, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Look, councillors, I think these are really solid indicators, economic indicators for us, and I can't really recall them being as strong as they are, certainly in all areas. And that diverse economy, many sectors, not a one or two horse economy. It can be an Achilles heel at times, but it's really underpinned by the strong commodity prices that the agri business sector is achieving at the moment, and it looks like it will continue for some time. The $8 billion worth, I see, Stacey, that the numbers just keep going up and up. It's quite incredible, really. If you put that into perspective, when Canterbury did the rebuild, it was about 18 billion, and that had quite a massive impact on the national economy. You know, we're at 8 billion, so we're going to have an effect around us positively. Visitor expenditure is still pretty strong, and that's a testament to the domestic spend, really. But the challenges look like they're there as well. The cost, the supply chain, the labour shortage, we're all seeing it even in our own home lives of trying to get a builder or a tradesperson is pretty tough in the current environment. But I think we're well placed, and we should really be, be thankful that we have got everything pointing in the right direction, even if there are some uncharted waters ahead. So good report. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Is there any further questions or comments? I guess just the comment I would, just following on from Mayor Grant, is that this is a really good news story, and it is something we should be singing from the rooftops. And I'm wondering, firstly, I guess to CEDA and then maybe to the respective councils about, have we got any plans in place about promoting this really good story? Through the normal channels, media channels, etc. And if we don't, perhaps we should think about how do we do this, and collectively as a region.
If I can just start the answer to that question, Mayor Helen. I am working with Georgia Bramley from CEDA this afternoon to update the quarterly report on this. So there will be a media release around that, but there may be other opportunities to really promote the strong performance as well.
Great, thank you. And I think, we should take this opportunity to do exactly that, particularly to get it out to our business community. There are businesses out there hurting for a whole variety of reasons, not just the smaller ones, for a whole lot of reasons. So, if we could share some of this good news, then hopefully it will, as much about making people feel good about the bit that they're doing and where we live, etc., and the confidence for the whole region going forward. Thank you. So if there's no further questions, there is a recommendation on page 87. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Mayor Grant, moved by Mayor Grant. Now I can't see anyone else there. Are you able to unshare your screen, Stacey, please?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. So that motion has been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. And again, thank you, Stacey, to you and Peter for excellent reporting. Much appreciated. Okay, so moving on with our agenda, no late items, notification of items for our next meeting. And while we may not have any today, well, hopefully there are. I think it's really important that we put a bit more thought into using these joint meetings as a way to keep promoting and solving some of the challenges that we have as a region, and getting these onto the agenda either for this part of the meeting or for our workshop. So does anyone have any items that they would like to put forward either for this or for our workshop session? Mayor Grant.
Madam Chair, I've had a discussion with a few of my councillors, and we see real value in pulling the two meetings together. So pulling the workshop items, because it is quite difficult for officers to engage on a workshop topic when it doesn't really have a decision or any teeth to it. So we've had and again, it's a loose conversation, and that's why I'm sharing it now, because you've brought it up, is we'd like to see the two elements come together, and we will submit items to that. Again, it probably creates a little bit of work for some of our officers, but I think we'd do that obviously in consultation with them to ensure that we have meaningful discussion that is shared between both the district and the city.
Yeah, excellent comments. I just think this is a really good opportunity for us to come together and have a conversation. So let's make the most of it. And I'm happy whether we put it in the formal part of the meeting or workshop, but if we get that inclusion of our teams, of our staff, all the better. Anyone else comment on or an item they'd like to put on the next one? Otherwise, we will send out an email closer to the time and invite you to add items that we can put onto the agenda. Thank you. So with that, we'll move to item 11, and I'm happy to move that we move into public excluded for the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the CEDA Director recruitment. So I've moved that. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second that, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you.